And I think this time period is like the best for applications. Yeah. Okay, so many of you, especially like the freshmen, um, like especially if you are new to NUS or like if you're new to like computing in general, you might have questions like, oh, how can I prepare my resume? So here are some like resume writing resources which we find useful. So Tech Interview Handbook has like a lot of tips, a lot of resources on how best to create on like what's like a good resume. Um, and also another article that we find useful is like an article by Kenneth, right? So Kenneth is he was a former admin in the Project Intern Telegram group, and he has this article showing case like how his resume has evolved over time, over the years, as he progressed from year one, year two, year three, and finally to when he graduated. And I think it's useful as like a baseline of reference, as a base point of reference, if you're especially if you're just starting out. Yeah, and also I think this subreddit also contains useful resume references, and I think it's good to use them as like references for your own resume as well. In terms of resume templates, there are a few resume templates that you can consider. But I think it's also quite useful to learn how to do it in latex. And the reason for that is that I've heard that latex resumes um, are more ATS friendly. So they are more like, because usually recruitment pipelines, they have a lot of like applicants, and they usually use some form of like applicant tracking system. They use some form of like passing to like pass resumes. And like usually latex resumes are like more ATS friendly, like more machine friendly. Yeah. Um, yeah, but and also I think a good thing about latex is that it's code, it's in code, right? It's code first. So like it's easy for you to make changes, it's easy for you to add sections whenever you need to. Okay, so um so some key guidelines that we have for your resume is that usually try to keep it to one page, keep it short, keep it condensed. Don't make it too long, right? Because um I think it's important for you to be able to like condense and distill your experiences into like one page. And if you're like a freshman or like if you're new to the tech scene, you might not have like a lot of like experiences or like projects. I guess like our advice to you is to really put in everything you can think of, even if it's lame, right? It can be as simple as like creating a simple script, a simple automation to help automate some part of our life. And even if you think it's lame, that's fine, right? Because everyone starts from somewhere, right? That's how everyone starts. And then slowly, as you gain more experience, as you have more projects, you can slowly filter and curate the best projects for your use case. Um, and also it's important to showcase your strengths through each contributions in your resume. So for every like line or like for every experience or every project that you put in your resume, make sure that you're able to like justify or to like say, because usually when you are invited to like the interviews, like the recruiter or the interviewer is interested to know more about the project that you have developed or that you have worked on, right? They will ask questions, and I think the the onus is on you to be able to spin it into a conversation, right? Such that you can talk about like why is it important, what are some engineering challenges that you face, what was the business impact, what was the user impact, right? And I think having like a good conversation, having like this two-way conversation with your interviewer is a good way for you to showcase like your talent, ability, and passion. And also for getting feedback on your resumes, I think platforms like the resume review portal, which is also from the tech interview handbook, is also useful for getting like an extra pair of eyes on your resume as well. And you can also like send a courteous message to like the project intern chat. Um, right. So usually there are anonymous people who are willing to help you to like review a resume, to like give you feedback on how best to improve a resume as well. Yeah. So usually this is like how someone will like reach out to like a project intern chat. And usually there will be a bunch of people who you will usually like directly message you, yeah, to just give you like feedback. So a common question that we usually get is like, oh, what if I have nothing to put, right? And that is where building your skills, building experience, building your projects come into play. So naturally, one would be asking like, oh, what should I build? What do I build, right? And it can be about anything. Um, it can be about like solutions that it can be solutions to problems that you or like your friends are like facing, it can be also like build your own X. So build your own X is like this is like a tutorial, like a lesson, right? And it basically allows you to build your own like gate, build your own Docker, build your own shell. It allows you to build certain stuff that we usually take for granted in our development workflow. And I think it's really, really useful for you to understand what exactly happens under the hood. Yeah. Um, and also contributing to open source. And I think it's also quite useful, especially if you have a project that you're very, very passionate about and is doing good work and is something that you want to play a part in. I think open source is also a good alternative to like to building like your technical skills. I think YouTube tutorials are also a good way, especially if you don't know where to start. Um, Usually YouTube and make sure that when you are following the YouTube tutorials, make sure that you are also like documenting like, oh, why am I doing this step? Why am I doing this step A? Why am I doing step B? Right? So that you're able to like um put in your resume like what are some of the engineering decisions that you made while doing like this project. It's important to like not there's this phenomenon called like tutorial hell where you simply follow the tutorial without actually thinking. And I think this might be detrimental to you in the might be detrimental in the long term, especially because like if you're not actively thinking about the decisions or like the code that you're writing, um, it it you will in fact like lose out because like you won't have like the thinking mindset, the mindset of like, oh, why am I doing this? Or like, why am I doing this in a certain way? Yeah. And also the last thing that could be useful is also technical writing because I think it is important for an engineer to also understand like, oh, to beyond understanding like the technical problem, it is also important for like an engineer to be able to communicate his problems or like to communicate like an advanced technical abstract concept into something that's like simple and easy to digest. Yeah. So an example of a solution, a problem that you might face. So I have a friend that actually worked on like this YouTube video thing. So essentially how it works is that you get like the YouTube URL of the video that you're interested in transcribing. You paste that URL into like the text box over here. Then it will actually use AI and LLMs to actually pass through like the contents of the video and it creates like a textual description of like whatever that has been talked through to the video. So that's quite useful. Um, so another solution, right? Another like problem that like I think one of my seniors have actually faced in the past is this aircon board. So like so it is quite like manually tedious to get like the quantity of like aircon credits because they have to like log in like some portal and then it takes a while to actually log in the portal and to navigate to like the actual page that shows like the amount of aircon credits. So I think what one of my senior did was that he created like a Telegram bot that automatically retrieves the quantity of aircon credits. Yeah, so it basically improves like the quality of life and we don't have to spend like time logging in, navigating to the page to simply get like the aircon credits. Yeah. So I also have like another friend who also did like some technical writing. So he also maintains a blog, and I think a blog is a great way to consolidate all of our learnings of like different concepts into like one space. And I think one really cool thing about his blog, right, is that like this graph over here, like on the right side, like each node represents like one article. Yeah, and like the links between like each node, it it represents like the connections between like different like CS concepts, and I think it's useful for one to actually gain like a high level overview of like how this concept links to another concept. Yeah, so I think this was quite cool as well. Open source. So there are a variety of like open source projects here in NUS. So there's NUS mods. So NUS mods is like this tool that built by NUS students for NUS students, and it basically provides like a way. Uh, it provides a way um for NUS students to like map the to to map and plan their module timetables. The next would be Google Summer of Code. So Google Summer of Code is a program that happens yearly. And it basically allows you to um contribute to like open source projects. Yeah. And a common question that like freshmen might have is like, oh, what if I don't know how to build anything, right? And so there are a variety of resources that you can actually go. So such as like MDN web documentation, the Odin project, and these are all like they contain like they will give you like the knowledge and the skills for you to be able to start working on like a simple website, right? And also, we also hold, as NUS hackers, we also host like a series of like regular workshops where we teach beginners on like simple on like fundamentals, right? So stuff like introduction to Rust, or like how to spin up Docker instances, or introduction to like self-hosting. And these workshops are also open to everyone. So you can also feel free to join like our workshops if you have time. And we also give you like and I think it's useful because you're able to like because we teach you like the basics of like setting up like a Linux server, and then you can actually take it on from there. Yeah. Lastly, um, if you have like a specific interest, like let's say if you are interested in like machine learning, or like in competitive programming, or like in security, right? These are like some websites you can further explore to explore your respective interests. I think the main philosophy behind this is that if you're interested in an area, if you're interested in a niche, continue to find websites, continue to find resources that are related to their interests, right? Because I think it's because on one hand it helps you like deepen like your expertise, cultivate your interest, and it also serves as like a talking point in your resume, right? It basically offers you like a platform to practice um and cultivate your interests. Yeah. So as for a cover letter, so usually a cover letter is quite it's unique and it's personalized, but usually it's not necessary. And also a cover letter is very, very time consuming, right? Um usually it will take about like 15 to 20 minutes. You first need to read about the company's mission, and then you need to talk about like how you're interested in contributing to the company mission through an internship. But I think it usually takes a lot of effort, and usually the option for putting in like your cover letter is not required, right? And it's a lot of time and effort. Usually I avoid doing it, but if you do want to do it, this is just like a personal opinion of like how an effective cover letter could look like. Okay, so now that you're done, and the last part, in like the summer phase, right, in the 3 months of summer, is to prepare for interviews. Um, so how one can actually prepare for interviews, and usually there are multiple types of like interviews, right? So the most common kind of like technical interviews is algorithmic questions, right? So usually they'll give you like a leak code problem, and you're expected like either live code, or you're expected like whiteboard your solution to like the algorithmic problem. Um, so here are some like useful guides that we actually find. So here are some guides that we find useful when you're actually preparing for interviews. So one example is the coding interview prep. So I think it contains like a lot of like resources on like how best you can prepare for like the technical interview. And I think like the key thing to note is like usually for technical interviews, it's not as simple as just going straight in and solving like the leak code problem. Usually they're looking for like other stuff as well, stuff like your communication, or like how well you actually like clarify the question requirements before going into the problem itself. Um, and also different companies, we have different expectations on the candidates. So like there might be certain companies that simply want you to write code to solve the problem. There might be other companies want you um that want you to ask questions, to clarify requirements, and to really communicate while writing code, right? So it really differs from company to company. There's no one size fits all solution. So I think the best way is to usually ask your recruiter. And usually when you're invited for an interview, they will send like this like document, like interview guide, or like what are they looking for in an interview. So yeah, so that's another source of info when you're preparing for like the interviews. So there are other types of technical interviews. So while algorithmic interviews are like the most common, they are not necessarily the most there are other types of technical interviews as well. So like system design, where they give you like a broad problem statement, like design like YouTube, or like design like a video streaming service, and they're expected to come up with like the different components and how the components will interact with one another, right, to create like this full service. Um, it's also like implementation, live coding, something like algorithmic, but it doesn't have to be algorithmic as well. It can be like a real engineering problem, right? Like given like this log file, extract some data from the log file and display it on console, for example. Um, so bug hunting. So usually they give you like this code base, and this code base has like some bugs, has some flaws, and you're expected to find like the bugs or like the flaws in the code base. So there are there are some companies that also give like take-home assignments. So essentially, you have like the luxury of time. You're not time constrained. You don't have to feel pressured to complete this assignment within like 1 or 2 hours or within the span of an interview. Um, you are you actually have like maybe a few days to complete like a small project. Yeah. And the last type of like technical interview questions that we usually encounter is like tech fundamentals. So usually there are some interviews where they actually ask you trivial questions or like different computer science topics, right? On like networking, operating systems. So a very, very common question uh, that people usually get is like, oh, what happens when you enter like a URL into your browser, for example? Yeah. So the general philosophy behind preparing for interviews is to practice, right? There's no like one way around it. But like I think the main point behind practicing is just to do it consistently. You don't have to do like 10 a day or anything. You doing 2 or 3 per weekend is sufficient enough. And I think it's also one thing to be able to solve the leak code problem, like in an OA, like in an online assessment, but it's also another thing to solve a problem while talking about it, while talking about your thought process. And that is where doing mock interviews with friends is important, right? Because when you're actually doing mock interviews with friends, it really gets you in like the mental space of like interviewing. It gets you into the process of like, oh, being able to talk through your code while coding. Yeah, and this is something that is also worth practicing. And the last tip that we have is to not avoid difficult questions. If you get stuck, look at the solution quickly, look at the solution, and then move on, right? It's not worth to spend 3 or 4 days thinking deeply about the problem because the concept that is involved in solving the problem might not be relevant or might never even be covered in like technical interviews. Um, and on the other hand, if you simply skip difficult questions and if you fall back to like familiar questions, it's also very difficult for you to improve as well. So I guess like a good middle ground is to um, spend 1 hour on a problem, and if after 1 hour, if there's no meaningful progress, it's useful to look at the solution and try to internalize the concept and then move on. Yeah. Um, yeah, and we've covered a lot of stuff like preparing resumes, preparing for interviews, and yes, this entire process is exhausting, but it's important, especially if you want to get into like tech. And also, a good thing is that this gets easier the more you do it. So like when you're doing like when you're preparing for like one technical interview or like when you're preparing for like one mock interview, this interview is preparation for like the next your future technical interviews as well, because the concepts the skills that you possess, like communication, verbalizing your thought process, these are skills that are transferable across different technical interviews. So um, like what we've previously mentioned, it's quite common for the recruiters or like the interviewers to go deep dive into resume, right? So it is important, like before your interview, to reread your resume, right? To understand why did you put this experience, and like to be able to justify like what are some of the challenges that you face, what are some of the engineering decisions that you made while developing this project, right? And another thing that's useful is to prepare concise summaries of your work, right? And why this um, might be useful is because sometimes during like the first 5 minutes of like an interview, the interviewer might ask you like briefly introduce about yourself and briefly introduce about the project XYZ that you did at a company. And if the project that you worked on at the company is very, very complex, it's not worth rambling over the project for like 5 to 10 minutes. So I guess it's useful to prepare like concise summaries of like what you do so that you're able to um, uh, briefly explain like what you did. And if the interviewer is interested to know more, then you can further dive in. Um, yeah. So lastly, there's also like a behavioral round. So usually to tackle like these behavioral questions, there's like a fixed format: situation, task, action, and result. Um, and here we also linked some resources that we feel might be useful to tackle these behavioral questions. So these shows you like tips and like resources and like how best to answer like these interview questions. Um, and I guess the main general tip that you have for like behavioral rounds is to really recall your previous involvements. It doesn't have to be tech related. It can be like NS related. It can be school related. So as long as it showcases how well you can work in a team, how well you communicate with one another, how basically experiences that show that how you will be like a good employee in the company. Yeah, all of these experiences they will add up, and be useful in the behavioral round. So yes, there is a lot of stuff. We've covered a lot of ground. We've covered resume preparation. We've covered interview preparation. We've covered like um, what to do, how to build your skills, how to build experience. So it can get overwhelming, right? So it is important to like, take it one step at a time, right? Because we have 3 months, right? We have May, June, July, August, right? We have like these 3 to 4 months, and there's more than enough time for you to like work on each of these like stuff. So the best time to start is now. So like as you're watching this talk, I think it's a great first step to getting started in your internship journey. And so after summer, so after you've worked on like these three things, right? So what is the next step? So the logical next step is to apply, right? So usually the applications for like companies will usually open in August 2025, right? Um, and usually applying for internships are very, very easy. All you have to do is to put like your bio data. So stuff like your name, your last name, phone number, upload your resume, and that's it. Usually it's quite straightforward. It's quite painless. Um, and a common question that we get is like, oh, how or like where do we find internships? So usually they're like job aggregators, right? So these are platforms that actually aggregate jobs from like different places and they put it all into one platform, right? So something useful that you can consider is LinkedIn job alerts. So what you can do is that you can go into LinkedIn, you can configure some settings, and you can put like software engineer intern. You can set an alert, set a location, and what will happen is that LinkedIn will actually send you notifications, regular notifications or like emails on like when internship posting is available. And sometimes the postings that they send you, they might not be directly relevant to like what you're interested in, and that's fine because like it takes at most 20 seconds to go through like the list of postings and to see whether you're interested to apply to in the first place. Here we also link some additional resources that we feel might be useful. Yeah, so so I think one thing that might be more useful, especially if you're looking for like local internship, is this SG Tech companies list. So it's essentially like a markdown list that contains like the list of internships in that are opening in Singapore. Another source of where you can find internships is career fairs and events. So SOC regularly organizes career fairs, right? So career fairs are a great way for you to know the company, to meet the recruiters, meet the engineers, and to learn more about the work that they do at the company. And CFG also conducts many regular like ad hoc events, right? Um, so I think it's also like a great way for you to know more about the company and also to know more about like the internship openings as well. Um, hackathons. So usually there are companies that will sponsor hackathons and they will usually have like a physical booth in the hackathon. And this is also like a great way for you to like interact with the company. So usually companies will position themselves, they will position themselves in places where they want to um, expose, like to publicize the company. So if let's say like if you're interested, and you can actually make use of this like proximity to find like companies. So if let's say you're interested in startups, what you can do is that you can go to like a VC firm, you look up their portfolio companies, then you go like let's say Sequoia Capital or like Kleiner Perkins, you can see like the companies that are being backed, and then you can go to their website to see if they have internship openings. If you're interested in research, you can go to like these conferences, find their sponsors, go to the company website, and again see if they have any like internship openings. And also like it can also be as simple as like looking around you, right? Because I think the companies that are like are powering our everyday day-to-day life, right? They will usually need like some form of like interns, and I think there's no harm to check or um whether they have any internship openings. So let's say if like you use Spotify on your app, right? There's no harm to check or whether there's like openings or like internship openings on the Spotify careers website. Yeah, so this is like how a rough flow, like how applying for an internship will look like. So usually you search for like the company name, right? You go to their career website, you fill in your bio data, and that's it. Yeah, so it's usually relatively quite straightforward. And a common question that we also get is where do we find experience? And that is where SOC can help, right? NUS SOC, right? There are a lot of like open source projects that you can consider at SOC. And if you're a freshman, right, you can also consider doing CVWO or Orbital, where you work on like a project in teams, which also provides you like um, useful experience um, when working in a team. to work on a project. And also, if you're interested in working in startups, you can also consider NUS Enterprise Startups or NUS Overseas College, which provides you the opportunity to travel overseas while interning at a startup. Lastly, you can also consider the Venture Initiation Program, which actually provides you with like a 10K free equity fee grant if you work on a startup. Yeah. Referrals. Um, so referrals, they do help, but not necessarily a must. So just because you don't get a referral doesn't mean you're doomed from the application. And the thing is that referrals, all they do, right? They're not like a panacea. They don't necessarily get you like the final internship slot. All they guarantee or like all they enforce is that, oh, you're able, it ensures that your resume get at least looked at, right? So at least you'll get like an OA, at least you'll get an interview. It doesn't necessarily mean you will pass the entire pipeline, right? The onus is on you to hone your skills so that you can continue to clear the interview rounds. The last thing that we wanted to bring home is rejections. So ultimately, applying for internships is a numbers game, right? Their rejections are very common because there are a lot of applicants for like a few internship slots. So it is very, very common to get like rejected. And I think it's also important to not be obsessed or like to not be enamored with like one specific company, because if you place such high hopes on one company, it is very, very easy to feel demoralized. It's very easy to get disappointed because there's a very, very statistically high chance that you probably will get rejected. Yeah. So everyone struggles a lot, right? So you're not in this alone, right? But I guess like a good mindset to have is that you only need one offer, right? Even if you apply like 100 companies and you get 99 rejections, but you have one offer, I mean, that offer matters, right? And that is the offer that you'll be doing, like doing whatever period that you applied for. And getting an offer is usually a combination of a skill and luck, right? Just because you don't get an offer doesn't mean you're like a bad engineer or like no one likes you, right? It basically means things didn't go right at that singular point. It didn't go right for the interview. It didn't go right for the company. Maybe the interviewer was having a bad day, or maybe you messed up a bit, right? And that's fine, right? Because it will get better over time, especially when you do more interviews. Yeah. So I think we talked about this at length, but the main thing is that um, just because you got rejected doesn't mean you're a bad engineer, right? It just means that things didn't go right at that specific point in time for this specific company. And another useful mindset to have is that ultimately this is a bar. It's not a race, right? So companies, they don't interview like 1,000 candidates and they don't rank like the top 5 candidates because companies don't have resources to do that. So so as long as you like meet the bar, right, you will usually clear the interview rounds. And lastly, when you get an offer, congrats. But the thing is that getting an offer is not the end. Instead, it's the beginnings to an end, right? So if you were to get an offer, so some tips that we have for maximizing your internship experience is to really is to like, for instance, like dog fooding. So like usually when you join an internship, when you join like a startup, they have like this product, an existing product, and I think what you can do is you can do dog fooding. So meaning you poke around the product as though as the end user, so that you can really understand what is the business, what is the product that they're building. And I think it's also important to take notes and to also talk to your colleagues and supervisors about the work that they do, because sometimes not everything is documented. You might not know like why they write code in this way, why did they write code in this certain structure, and these are engineering decisions that you might only know when you talk to your colleagues and supervisors. And another useful tip that we have is to think about the business impact, right? So I think as an engineer, your job is while your primary job is to build products, I think it's also important for the engineer to think about where does the product that he's developing, does the where the feature he's developing fits in like the big picture, like how does it help in the company? Yeah, so I think that's also like a useful tip that we have. And the last useful tip that we also might have is to ask for feedback frequently, right? To have like one-to-one review sessions with your manager, with your mentor, weekly catch-ups to 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 basically get tips and get feedback as to like how your internship performance is so far and how best you can improve moving forward. So some alternatives, if you don't get like an internship, right? There are other stuff that you can do, like your own project and startup. You can do like research, and I think research is like unique because you are given like a vague, big, ambiguous problem, and you're encouraged to think deeply about it. So I think research is also quite useful. You can also think about going to open source, like Google Summer of Code. There are programs that actually allow you to contribute to projects Um, and and because these open source projects are big, so you are encouraged to work like in a team, yeah, to contribute to these projects. So it's also like a good resume experience as well. And even if you don't get like, and you don't have to feel compelled to do something, right? Just because everyone else is doing it. So feel free to take some time to relax and breathe, to give yourself mental space to breathe, and this will help you recharge and relax and prepare for like the next cycle forward. So some parting thoughts that we have is that this process is extremely emotionally exhausting and tiring. I think this is something that we have talked about at length throughout the presentation, right? But I think the key thing to note here is that your friends are going through it with you. You're not in this alone, right? I mean, everyone's applying for the internships um, simultaneously. Um, so talk to them, help each other out, and there are also places like Project Intern, which has a bunch of people, anonymous people, trying to apply for internships as well. So this will also allow you to get like status updates on like when the internships open. Um, and remember, you only need one offer. It doesn't matter whether you get rejected by 99 companies. So as long as you have one offer, that's all you need, right? Um, yeah. And lastly, there's no such thing as not being prepared enough, right? Um, every short, every position you don't apply is a definite rejection, right? So preparation involves accumulating learnings, and each time you fail an interview, you can use this interview experience as a learning experience for you to learn from your mistakes and so that you can bounce back up stronger. Yeah. Yeah, and that's it for like the presentation. So now we'll be taking like a 5 minutes break um before like the panel presentation.
Hey everyone. So we'll be starting our panel discussion now, and it is now 7:50. So first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Prakam Singh. I am a member of NUS Hacker, same as Ben earlier, and I am just going to be your moderator for this panel discussion. Also, just let me know if my audio has any issues or if my voice is not very clear. Um, I will try to adjust that. Okay, the most important part of a panel discussion obviously are the panelists themselves, so let's get to it. I'll just read out your names one by one and you guys can go around introducing yourselves, yeah? So we've got Azim first. Azim, would you like to just intro yourself? Quick couple lines.
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Azim. I graduated NUS in 2023 and I came from Polytechnic. So I've worked in a bunch of different places, Accenture, GovTech, Shopee, and I'm currently a full-time engineer at Stripe. So happy to take questions on product engineering, on coming from Poly, anything on in that area, and about generally what this internship pathway to full-time offer conversion looks like as well.
Right. Nice to have you here, Azim. Next we've got Johanna. Would you like to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Johanna. So I graduated around 3 years ago and have been working in Google since then. So previously I went for NOC Southeast Asia to Indonesia, then ATAP and part-time in Rakuten Viki and summer internship in Google.
It's good to have you, Johanna. Kokre is next.
Hi, yeah, I'm Cloud Ray. So I graduated from NUS a few months ago. I guess I interned at a few places, but before that, I kind of got my first experience doing some like open source programs and volunteer dev work. Maybe something interesting is that like all my internship experience like differed based on like the modality. So like some were like part-time, some I flew overseas, some I did remote. And they also kind of like decreasingly involve security. I'm now a software engineer in Jane Street, Singapore office.
Quite interesting. It's good to have you here, Kokre. And lastly, we have Mayank. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Mayank. I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Pennsylvania, and I work on ML for healthcare, machine learning. And when I was in NUS, I graduated in 2023. I interned at CWO at this company called Garena, but mostly I was doing research. So if you have any questions about research or how research or research e-roles might work in the US or even Singapore, yeah, feel free to ask me that.
Right. It's great to have all of you guys here. Sure, we'll have a very fruitful discussion. I'd like to start off first with a question from the audience. It's been submitted anonymously, so I'm just presenting it here. Regarding internships, is it advisable to attach myself to one team in one company to acquire depth, or would doing internships with different teams slash companies be more advisable? So I think this question can be simplified to, would it be better to diversify my experience across different roles, or would it be better to kind of specialize into one role, one sort of type of company, maybe just going into big tech directly or going into finance? And yeah, I mean, just would like to hear your thoughts. Does anyone have anything they'd like to say first?
I can
If not,
start
yeah,
this
sure.
off.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think doing a variety of things when you are an intern is very helpful because that's the only time where you can the cost of jumping between domains is a lot lower. And so you can try out different things, right? You can do front end, back end, DevOps, whatever you want to do. And that general experience will make you a better engineer as a whole before you finally sort of decide, hey, I want to be a tech ops engineer or whatever for full-time roles. And it's a lot harder to do this once you've graduated and once you have a full-time job. So take the internship time to explore this. I think that's very helpful.
All right. Yeah, that does make sense. Does anyone else have anything else that they'd like to add on?
I guess like the main concern is also like if your roles are too diversified, like would companies want to hire you? So adding on to what Azim shared, yeah, it's really good if you diversify during your internships. But once you know like which area you like, you can start going deep into that. Yeah, so that your resume is like have several of the same roles. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that does make sense. I mean, once you do get an idea of, okay, this is a field I like, this is a field I enjoy, this is something that I want to do in the future, right? You kind of just build up on that and get more experience for yourself and also show employers that, yeah, this is what I like, this is what I do, this is what I'm good at. That's why here's my experience.
I've got
So yeah,
a resume hack here, which is to just list all the titles. As long as there's some kind of software engineer titles, just list them as software engineer on your resume. You don't need to say like data analyst and like, tech ops engineer, whatever. Just call it software engineer and just put like some description next to it. And screening services and people looking at it who are not like super technical will just see software engineer as your background for the past like 2 or 3 internships.
so you're doing different things, but branding it as one thing, kind of
Yeah,
being
exactly. I
kind of
mean,
being
you can
sneaky
always say
there.
I'm a software engineer, but like I did like, DevOps work, or I'm a software engineer, I did like whatever else work, right? And
So
then
yeah,
it still paints the same picture of the company is hiring a software engineer and you have software engineering experience.
yeah, so you're kind of just being a bit sneaky with your wording, is what you're
I
suggesting.
would not call it sneaky. I pretty accurate.
I mean, you're not lying either. You are saying you are being correct. You're giving an accurate description of what you've done as well as an accurate description of your title. So it's completely valid, basically. Yeah. Okay, that's yeah. Hopefully the question is cleared up. Next, we have a question on what are your top. Wait, sorry, give me a second. So the question is about grades, actually. As CS students, grades are always on our mind, and so the question is, are grades really that important for internships? And what about if you're looking at research internships specifically? So maybe on the research side, Mayank, I'm sure you could cast some light on this.
Sure. I think grades are overrated for research. What professors are, or anyone who wants to work in research is looking for initially is just some interest in what they've already done. And you'd be surprised at NUS as well, or anywhere in Singapore. You could probably just email any professor you want to work with and say, hey, I'm free for summer. I want to work part-time for you in the semester. There are many research modules about that as well. And just apply to work with them. And that's enough. Show genuine interest, perhaps show some expertise in, or at least some evidence that you know what you're talking about when you email them. But that's what matters the most. Like, I don't think they care at all about your grades. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. This is it's kind of a curious thing actually, because you might have expected that research is very academics focused, so they might be looking at your grades and your A pluses and A minuses and all those things. But yeah, I mean, sometimes grades are not everything. Grades are not that important. So you can take a little pressure off when it comes to your studies and focus more on just gaining interest into certain fields and working on that. What about internships in general? Does anyone have any ideas? Does this extend into industry internships?
I guess like I can like kind of opine about this. Obviously like I don't review resumes for like every company in the tech industry, so like I can't comment on what people think about. But I think like generally like probably like it's less important than you think. It's probably true that like some companies see grades as like a good indicator that like you can work hard and have like some like good CS fundamentals. But there are definitely places that have like a pretty academic culture, and like I would think they care a lot about grades. They've been like pretty like happy to hire people who have been able to like show that they can work hard and like have excellent CS fundamentals through other ways other than grades. So I think probably less than you might think.
Okay, yeah, I mean that makes sense. I mean, there might always be some companies who are a bit stringent on their grade requirements, but at the end of the day, majority of companies, as you're saying, probably don't care all too much about your grades. So yeah, again, it might be a good idea if you feel your grades are getting in the way of maybe your side projects or something. Take some pressure off the academics, right? That seems to be the consensus around here.
Yeah, I think you can tell very easily which company cares about it because they'll ask for your transcript. Yeah,
Right.
right. And there's a handful of companies in Singapore that just ask for your transcript, and I think those names are well known. The ones who don't ask for the transcript are don't really care.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. If they ask for a transcript, they're probably looking at your grades to filter you. So, but yeah, as you say, it's a handful, not all too many. Which is good news for most of us. We all know how difficult it is to keep our grades up, right? So, good news. Hmm. All right. There's a question hang on, another audience question. So, do you think working on projects is more important, or is it more important to have strong foundations? Um, because this person seems to think that they don't have enough time to do both this summer, which is completely reasonable. So, what's more important? Is it more important to stack up the side projects, gain some side experience, or is it more important to make sure your foundations in computer science, in the tech landscape are solid? Does anyone want to take this one?
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
yeah.
I guess
Go ahead.
like it kind of depends. I think like the pragmatic answer is that if you think like your resume, for example, like doesn't have enough evidence that like you can like engineer software, then maybe doing projects and like getting things on your resume that show that is probably more helpful in the short term, like getting an internship. I think it also depends on like the type of companies that you're applying for. There are companies that are less resourced, like maybe like startups, right, who want to see that you are able to build software and like you will be able to hit the ground running quickly. And then they have less resources to be able to like interview a bunch of people. So maybe they would prefer people who like clearly have done projects and like can build software. There are probably other companies with a lot more like interviewing and recruiting resources who are happy to like interview way more people, but maybe their interviews like test like I guess like have more depth, require more depth in CS fundamentals. So if you want to interview at these places, maybe optimizing for like strong foundations would be useful.
I see. So it kind of depends on your personal circumstances and also just your what your targets are, right? Like what do you aim for, basically. So yeah, I mean that does make sense to me. Does anyone else have anything they want to say about this? Um, okay, I assume not. Also, yeah, okay, everything's fine. All right. Some not some, a popular question that we've been getting over the years is how different is startup culture from big tech culture? Anyone wants to take this? Maybe Johanna?
Okay. Yeah, so the first difference would be like the pace. Usually startup is more fast-paced, whereas big tech is more slow just because like there are a lot of steps when we want to like let's say launch a new feature. So yeah, this might be an important consideration when like you want to go for something that is like more fast-paced or like slow. So that's the first one. The second one is, okay, this is based on personal experience, maybe guidance wise, because big tech is more structured. So usually, maybe there are more guidance, more documentations in the company as compared to startup. But doesn't mean that there's a lack of guidance in startup as well. Yeah, so fast pace and structure, I guess that's like the top two differences that I can say. Maybe other panelists want to share more about other companies as well.
Yeah, sure. The more the better. Anyone else? Okay, I guess not. No worries. Thanks, Joanna, for the answer. I think, yeah, this has been a pretty popular question. What's the difference between startups and big tech? And yeah, that's fairly good answer. Thank you
Can
for
I
that.
add one more thing, I think?
Oh yeah, sure.
I think the internship experience at a startup versus a big tech can be very different on one main thing where big tech companies will give you a very tightly scoped intern project and will likely tell you that, here are your milestones, here's what you're trying to do. The scoping is well done, the support is very clearly provided to you, and like, there's lots of this like helping the intern succeed kind of mindset. Things will be a lot more free form in a startup. You kind of need to investigate things yourself, figure things out yourself. And it will be a lot more hands-on in that sense. That is not to say that you learn less at a big tech company, of course. I'm just saying that like the amount of effort, or not effort, the amount of energy that the company can dedicate into giving you a very nicely packaged intern project to you is different in a startup versus a big tech company, right? This processes are a lot more mature in big tech companies, and so that's one of the big differences.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we have, I think, a fairly good idea now of the differences between startup and big tech culture. Give me a moment. Actually, it appears that someone's just telling me right now that the Q&A link doesn't seem to be working. Just give me a moment. Maybe if I refresh the page. All right, I may have to start a new link, unfortunately. So, okay, I'm apologize for the mix-up. I would have to start a new link. The old link, for some reason, just closed down and is not letting me reopen it. So we'll have to go for new questions. As in, if you have questions, you can just use this new link. Again, it's up on the screen, slides.goo.gl/1EUGV. Maybe River, if you can help me like copy paste the link in the chat as well, that would be good. Yeah, there. Thank you very much, Azim. All right. Okay, let's continue. Back on track. How do you prepare for, say, a non-technical interview? Or rather, the non-technical aspects of an interview, even?
I can kick this off. I think one of the big things is but like okay, but by non-technical, I assume this means that you're not like coding something live, right? And so this is everything else in the interview.
Yeah.
One of the like when I was at interning at or rather applying for internship at Stripe, the final round was around with the manager where he sat down and the questions they asked were a lot around things like what's the example of a conflict you've had with someone working in a group and how do you resolve it? You know, that sort of thing. And one of the previous slides talks about like the 64 like questions that come up in an interview. This is PDF published by some university. I can't remember which one. I thought that was very helpful because I did read that. But being able to talk about real life situations and how you manage them, like people conversations, is very helpful. Talking about this in the context of like working in teams, working with a person who you maybe do not get along that well with, or dealing with tight deadlines or an angry customer or something of that. So like think of these as like war stories that you want to be able to talk about and how you resolve them. And then I think just having that mindset will probably answer most of the questions that someone might throw at you at these interviews.
All right, all right. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add on?
Yeah, one thing I'll add
Yeah,
is
sure.
that one way to prepare for these non-technical aspects is just to practice, especially if you're not sure about your non-technical, abilities in these interviews. I know many people over here at Penn who set up practices with their friends like thrice or three times or four times just for the non-technical aspects. And you'll be surprised, especially in the US, a lot of recruiters increasingly now care a lot about the non-technical aspects because I mean you can easily cheat for lead code, right? But it's hard to cheat on the non-technical aspects. So yeah, like Azim said, prepare your war stories well, and not just prepare, but like I would say prepare saying them as well, at least twice or thrice, so that you kind of have a good grasp on what to say. The good news is that, especially in your third or fourth year, when you apply to many internships, hopefully the prior interviews serve as practice. But if you want to be prepared from the very get-go, I would say just practice with your friends as well. That's very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, they say practice makes perfect, right? So you would expect that practice plays a huge role in these kind of things. And it's no different in internships, in interviews, in practicing, whether it's technical or non-technical. Um, and in fact, non-technical could potentially be that thing that kind of pushes you over the top and into that role at that company, right? So yeah, practice makes perfect. Wonderfully put by Mayank. Okay, this is a very I almost want to say heavy question, but more than heavy is just a very relevant question, I feel, from the audience. So, in light of AI becoming better and better at solving coding problems, what are some tips you have for software engineers? He asks, or this person, sorry, asks, should we pivot to different areas like cybersecurity? I mean, you can just generalize this to how can you um, sort of adapt to the changing landscape and adapt to how AI is kind of taking over the tech industry and the role that AI is playing currently in the tech industry.
I have some input on this. at a company, being in a place that is, trying to make use of AI to make engineers more productive and that sort of thing. AI can solve lead code problems. AI can't make product decisions for you, and AI cannot product engineer for you. AI cannot build things for users, understand their pain points, and then solve that problem. And that is your job as a software engineer. So I don't think software engineers are not dead, nowhere near it, right? It just means we can work faster, work better. That's what this situation looks like, right? At work we have access to Cursor and like LLMs and all of that. And like I use LLM to write SQL queries because I can never get my SQL queries right. We have access to Cursor. You know, you need to still lay out what problem you're trying to solve for users, modeling things in a sensible manner. You still have a lot of concerns like, oh, are you doing too many DB reads here or too many writes here? How can you organize these things in a better way? And AI doesn't solve that problem. You can bounce ideas with it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that AI has replaced junior software engineers or whatever, like some big tech CEO has been saying for the past like 1 year.
Yeah, plus one
Yeah.
to what Azim said, definitely. Yeah, because like in Google, we are also actually like helped a lot by the AI on actually like I guess it's like there's a shift of like SWE role, like from coder to like a reviewer, and as Azim mentioned, like a high level designer of the project. Yeah, so I guess for us to not be obsolete, like we have to learn how to leverage on how to use AI. But yeah, I guess as junior engineers, even though it's valid that you are afraid of like getting replaced, I guess what you can do is like to prep learning about AI foundations to know how to leverage on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the idea here is that you think of AI as a tool that you can use to propel yourself upwards, right? Use it as a tool for learning, use it as something, as Azim mentioned, you bounce ideas off of it because AI is not going to be perfect anytime soon, right? Like, as Azim mentioned, and there's real world examples of this even. Azim mentioned he uses it to write SQL queries. SQL, you can think of it as just querying a database for those who don't know what SQL is. But maybe that query is not quite the best. So you still need to know what it is. You can't just kind of sit and hope that, ChatGPT or Cursor got it correct and send that in. You're building a product that's facing a lot of users. You're still responsible for a lot of it. So, yeah, I mean, pivoting to different fields could be an option for you if that's what you think you want. But AI is likely not going to, how do we say, is it will disrupt the industry, but you have to use it. And the better you use it, the better you become as well. That seems to be the consensus. It was badly phrased from on my part, and apologize for that, but seems to be the consensus here. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Let me add something here. Maybe
Yes,
just 2
yes, of course.
points. One is that you've got to look at AI or machine learning as a tool and not be bogged down by this zero-sum game mentality that maybe people have misconceptions based on looking at focus areas, let's say at SOC. They see, oh, there's like 6, 7 focus areas. That means my career could either be AI or it could be cybersecurity or it could be systems or it could be parallel programming, whatever. But that's not how real jobs work. They're not like kind of neatly divided into these buckets, right? How what I would if let's say I ask you to reframe this question, and instead of AI, I say code editors. So I say in light of code editors like Vim, Emacs, Visual Studio Code becoming better and better at helping you code, what are some tips you have for software engineers? Should you pivot away from to areas like cybersecurity? That makes no sense, right? And that's primarily because AI is primarily a tool for solving problems. And you'd be surprised at the amount of depth you need to solve difficult problems in cybersecurity or problems like in healthcare, for example, or problems in systems. There are whole fields which are much, much more bigger than just the buzzword AI, right? And then AI is being used in many of these fields. For example, in systems to, schedule processes much faster, and a variety of different things, right? So AI is not a job by itself. AI is not a field by itself that you can pivot to or pivot away from. It's just a tool that you should be using. That said, I also would kind of caution against like this whole mentality that AI will kind of code everything for you. Yeah, sure. If you want to create a simple website, CRUD application to add some rows, delete some rows, it's great. But let's say I ask you to understand like a code base which has 6 million lines of code, like Linux, for example. And then I say, you make a pull request to the code base. There's no LLM on the planet that can ingest the entire code base of Linux today, right? It just can't process 6 million lines of code in its context window, which means it's going to do a really terrible job and probably insert some like code vulnerability or like some kind of buffer overflow error somewhere in the code, which will be very hard to check. And software engineers make the same mistake as well, but at least software engineers know how to test their code very well. LLMs are really terrible at testing their code. They're really terrible at long context tasks. So I would caution against, this whole like AI hype of like, it's going to take a job over in 2 years. It's not going to happen that soon.
Yeah, heavy +1 to what Mayank is saying. And like, the development of like CAD technology, like AutoCAD, did not make engineers obsolete. It just meant that people didn't write blueprints on paper, right? They just like, is that a new skill set you need to have? Yes. Is it going to take your job away? No, the job function and the way you do the job changes, but that's basically it, right? At Stripe, we have LLMs as well. It cannot ingest the entire Stripe code base. If you ask it to do some refactoring, it might do some like light refactoring for you, but like anything more than that, we've got LLMs to do simple tools and they regularly screw it up. Maybe it gets better over time, but again, it is a tool to help you do your job well and do it faster and do it better and make you a better engineer or a more productive engineer. And it's not taking anyone's job away anytime soon.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what the consensus seems to be, right? AI is more of a tool that you can leverage to get better. Sure, it might kind of disrupt a few roles here and there. Your role might evolve, but it's very, very, very unlikely that it completely goes away, right? AI is not perfect. Neither are software engineers, but at least we kind of know what we're doing. AI is just kind of copying stuff from, whatever its context window, whatever its database, whatever its training data is. And yeah, I mean, seems like no need to jump ship, essentially. If you want to, go ahead, but no need to. It's pretty heavily upvoted question. Rather simple one, I think, or well, straightforward, hopefully, straightforward one. If you have a publication, but you're applying to a non-research role, will it be relevant to put your publication in your resume? In brackets, a tech/ML publication, but I think this can extend to any computer science or computer science adjacent publication, I assume. Maybe Mayank, if you have any ideas, or anyone else really.
I mean, yeah, sure. As long as the resume is not overflowing, it doesn't really help to, if you already have the publication, and which means you already put in at least, what, 3-4 months of effort at least on that particular thing. That's as much as a summer internship, right? Yeah, sure. Go ahead, put it on a resume. And if someone asks you about like a tough challenge you have, and this happens to be the tough challenge, talk about it, right? I don't think it is true that increasingly like a lot of people do have publications at all these conferences. Like even high school students have a track at NUS now. But yeah, for sure, put the publication on resume. It doesn't really hurt at all.
All right, yeah, okay. I feel like that's the question answered unless someone has an opposing viewpoint.
No opposing viewpoint, but I would also say that engineers reviewing the resume who are not in academia will be impressed by the fact that you have a publication. So if I'm sitting on the other end looking at this and going like, wow, this dude, like, or this person has published a paper, like that's obviously impressive because I didn't go into academia and I've never done this.
Okay. I mean, yeah, so I guess no opposing viewpoints. I mean, it's a good thing if you had a publication. As Mayank mentioned, you've probably put in a few months of effort and you've put in your time and your energy, and it's equivalent in duration at the very least to an internship, right? So why not? You've done some work, show it off. Okay, the next question is, give me a moment to find it. So the next question could be, or rather is on, what were your top considerations while applying for internships? This is actually, I've kind of rephrased a question from the previous Q&A. I'm not sure why it went off, but yeah, this is kind of rephrasing of a previous Q&A. What are your top considerations while applying for an internship? Maybe Cochrane, if you want to take this question.
Yeah, so like just to answer like the actual question, I don't know if this is a hot take, but I think you should have like no considerations at the point of applying. Like I claim that you should just apply for every single internship that exists because it only takes like 5 seconds to like copy paste your email and like drag your resume into like the whatever application form. And then like you should only start thinking about whether I really want to work here like once you get an offer. Yeah, that's my answer.
Okay, I see. So kind of just how can I call it, like a throw stones until it hits, I guess. That's a terrible analogy, but hopefully you get what I mean. Okay, I think this is a bit more specific version of the question. What should I prioritize for my first? I'm gonna change it to internship, I guess, instead of job. What do I prioritize for my first internship? Do I go for a graduate program, maybe big tech, maybe startup? And I think Cochray's answer still applies to this one as well, but does anyone else have any ideas, any things that they want to mention?
I think this question premises that you have the luxury of that choice. And assuming you're in the position where you have all of these options in front of you, then I think you should try to do whatever gives you the most exposure, right? The obvious sounding answer might be a graduate program because they'll rotate you in like a bunch of different places. But I would argue that a startup moving quickly is probably going to give you more technical exposure than a graduate program will. Yeah. So if you want to, pick up a whole bunch of skills really quickly, a startup is a great place to do that, right? Like at startups, you are front end and back end and DevOps and the infra engineer and everything, And so I think that's not a bad place to be. Big tech gives you more stability. It gives you a structured path. It gives you a brand on your resume. And that's also a good thing. But yeah, I mean, I think I wonder if the person asking this question in their mind is saying that, okay, whatever this panel says, oh, I will only start applying for graduate programs and trying to get that answer out of here. And I would then reiterate Cochray's answer, which is apply for everything, right? Don't set yourself up in a position where you only have one kind of offer available to you, right? The market is not easy, it's tough. Apply for everything. When you have that choice, then make a decision.
Also, just to quickly add on, the best way to answer this question is if you're early on in your degree, then just apply to both big tech and startups and then try to intern at a mix of the two so that when you actually try to figure out where you want to work full time, you have a at least rough sense of the differences between startups and big tech.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you were still talking. Yeah, I mean, that does make sense. It really depends on what you want to go for, right? You might want to look at what kind of exposure you want to go for. It could depend on just, or if you don't know what you want to do, really, you can take Cochray's suggestion, which is click apply, 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 wherever it's open. So, bunch of approaches, and yeah, I mean, thank you guys for your answers. I mean, I hope this person who's asked this question has a clearer idea, a better idea of what they should do now. Okay. This question is oddly specific, or well, not oddly specific. You'll see soon why it's specific. But for SW internships at HFTs like Jane Street, do you have any advice on how candidates can prepare for interviews? So, for example, CS fundamentals, system design, etc. And I guess we can also, Cochrane, I assume you would want to take this, but we can also generalize to just SW internships, period, and kind of think about how we want to, what we want to prioritize when it comes to preparing for interviews. So I guess specific to HFTs, if anyone wants to answer, or even a general, go right ahead.
Yeah, I'll give an answer that maybe isn't super satisfying, but like I don't think that like trading companies like all interview the same way. And I think that like the way you should like try to answer this question for yourself is that like once you get an interview from a company, you should try to figure out like what their interviewer cares about and like what they care about in their candidates. You can do this by like I think a lot of companies, especially like well-resourced companies, they'll like have resources about their interviews online, or like you can just like email the recruiters, for example, or you can like ask around. Yeah, I think like every company like interviews in a different way and like cares about different things. And once you get an interview, you should like, I guess, figure out what this specific company cares about and then maybe prepare for that.
Yeah, I think
Just to
it's
follow up,
a
Kokri, would you say
yeah, of
that
course, of course.
programming in C is very important for that? C, C++, is that like important? Use it, is like really important sort of
For
activities or no?
Yeah, I guess like for companies that want you to program in C++ for the interviews, then like if you apply that advice, you will figure out that, oh, this company requires you to code in C++ for the interview, and then maybe you want to prepare in C++. But I wouldn't say that like across like an entire like sector or like an entire industry, like there is one like specific way you want to prepare for interviews.
all right, yeah, that makes sense. Another thing is this person's mentioned topics, right? CS fundamentals, system design, and then just etc. How would you go about, given like maybe a company or a sector or a role, how would you go about preparing for that role, for the maybe the interview or the take-home assignment or online assignment or lead code quiz or whatever it is that the um, application process has? How would you go about preparing for just the concepts that would be involved? How would you go about even identifying those concepts? Does anyone have any ideas? Maybe Johanna or anyone actually.
I think Ben shared a lot of resources like in the first part earlier, so I guess can start with those. Yeah, this would definitely help.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we did share a whole bunch of resources on various topics. So do look through those. I think the link to the slides has been shared in the chat. So
Another thing I would add on is that uh, your NUS content is pretty good. I remember going through my networks and operating system slides before these kinds of interviews where like having done the module itself, I would skim through the slides and go through the major concepts, right? And then I would test myself with the standard networking question is what happens when you type google.com into a URL bar. There's a bunch of standard like OS questions that you can find on the list behind. They'll talk about like, oh, threads versus processors or whatever, right? And just go and answer those questions for yourself. I think that's a very great way to make sure that you can do this. And as long as you have the right reasoning, I think the interview on the other hand also doesn't have the super in-depth knowledge about everything, right? So they just want to see how well you can reason about these things and make like logical conclusions and make sure that you have the baseline knowledge to be able to make these to have a discussion on whatever topic they've given you. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's a good suggestion. As Azim mentioned, for those of you studying at NUS, NUS does have pretty good, I would say, fundamental courses. So if you're going into networks, the intro to networks, intro to cybersecurity, these kind of courses are pretty good. Intro to OS as well. The material they teach is quite well curated, I feel. I mean, um, I think most NUS students here could agree with me, potentially. Um, Another thing is auditing courses. So most universities, and I'm sure, I'm very sure NES does it because I'm doing it myself, allow you to audit courses. So you essentially sit a course and you have to, well, I forget the requirements exactly, and it depends between courses and universities, but you can take the course without having to do any of the assignments. So I forget how the requirements go, what you do have to do, what you don't have to do, and how it kind of shows up on your transcript. I forget those, but many universities offer this option. So maybe if you feel like, okay, this is too much, but I do want to try out networks, maybe you could audit the Intro to Networks course at your university, maybe at NUS or NTO, wherever you are. That's a suggestion that I just wanted to throw in here if you do want to prepare for a specific topic. But yeah, thanks, Azim, for answering. All right. Rather simple. Well, I don't know about simple, but again, a fairly popular question. Overseas internships. So, what's the best way, or what are some good ways to land overseas internships?
Okay, I guess I'll speak a little bit about this. So I've interned in Hong Kong and the United States. Like I guess there are a few parts to this answer. Like the first thing is you need to apply. Like if you want to apply and like do an internship in the United States, which is like a goal that I had, you need to be prepared to like apply to way more places. I think I applied to like 10 times the amount of like US companies compared to like companies in Singapore, and I heard back like 10 times less, so I guess like 100 times smaller hit rate. And then like some specific things you can do if you are like Singaporean, we have this like visa, and like there's this line that you can put in your resume saying like, oh, okay, next time you don't need to go through a lottery. Some people talk about like lying on the application saying that you don't need sponsorship. I've never done that, and like I wouldn't do that. I think it's like you just don't want to waste your time. Like if they call you back and then they realize that, oh, you can't actually you aren't actually eligible for this internship, I think it's like not worth wasting your own time, because like applying just takes 5 seconds. And then like so I think something like interesting and like maybe more creative you can do, and this is something that like a friend of mine told me about and something I applied and like got offers through, is like try to be like come up with some heuristics that like will give you lists of companies that may be more likely to hire like a random student from Singapore. An example is, for example, like NOC companies. Like if a company has NOC interns, they probably are familiar with like the standard of like NUS like computing students. They probably like, have some understanding of like the visa process, so you can apply there. Look at companies that, for example, hire a lot of Canadian students, right? Because our visa situation as Singaporeans, or if you're Singaporean, it's pretty similar to like Canadians, and plenty of like Waterloo students go intern in the United States. So if you find the companies that hire a bunch of Waterloo students, they probably have like these necessary immigration set up to hire an NUS student. So try to be creative in that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good suggestion, right? Maybe look for, if you know companies that have had sort of foreigner interns before, they may be more willing to hire you as a student studying here in Singapore, right? Does anyone have any other ideas, any suggestions that haven't been mentioned? Okay, no worries. I feel like the ideas that have been given are pretty extensive already. Thank you very much, Cochrane, for that. Um, okay, another question from the audience. I feel like this is a pretty good one. So you've gone through all the hurdles of applying and the interview and the assignment and assessment and this and that, got the internship. How do you sort of maximize the chances of getting a return offer during the internship? For context, a return offer is essentially a company saying, okay, your internship with us, we liked your performance during the internship you had with us earlier. Once you graduate, we'd like you to come and work for us full time. That's what a return offer essentially is. So, does anyone on the panel have any ideas, any good tips for maximizing your chances of getting a return offer?
I think I can speak to this because my full-time job came from a return offer. And so I can get the ball rolling here. My intern manager was very upfront with me on like my first week, where he said, okay, Azim, is your goal to get a return offer? And I was like, of course. I was like, okay, then these are, we're gonna try to make sure you exceed expectations, try to do these things, show that you're a very good engineer. And so I think the point here is that setting expectations with your manager is the first very important step, right? That you're aiming for a return offer, and what can you do to demonstrate that, right? The second thing is obviously to try and find out what metric they're using. I can speak for like bigger tech companies. They, with a proper intern program, they're going to have like some sort of metric that they use to gauge your performance, and it's probably some watered down version of the full-time performance evaluation thing that they have. So go get a copy of that, and then evaluate yourself against whatever those like ladders look like. The third thing I would say is talk to other people on the team, find out like if there are ex-interns who have converted to full-time. That experience is very close to what you're aiming for. And so talking to them to find out what the company values is probably a very good step in figuring out what attributes you should be displaying, what kind of work you should be doing to show that you're eligible for a return offer. And obviously this implies that you've already done the bare minimum, which is you finish your intern project and all of that as well. So this is everything like, icing on the cake to help you get there.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of, this is kind of a connector. You're looking for shared experiences. You're looking for someone else who was in the same position as you maybe a few years before. They were an intern there and they got a turn offer. You might want to go just ask them, like, how did you do it? I want to do the same thing, right? You have a very nice manager, apparently, Azim. just straight away asking you
My
what's your
manager
goal?
was a recent graduate as well, so he understood like this thing. And I think yeah, setting those expectations with your manager very early on is very, very helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, recent grad, so they kind of understand what you're aiming for, right? His manager was a recent grad. Maybe you go and you find your manager was a recent grad, or just your coworker or someone at the office is a recent grad. So they'll all have a good idea of what you're going through, and they might be able to help you out there. So, I mean, yeah, just
Well, one more thing
networking
I
even.
can add on is getting feedback from your manager regularly to ask if you're on track for a written offer, or to on track to meet expectations is very, very helpful, because they're the ones assessing you eventually. And so like I used to end every one of my one-on-one sessions with, do you have any feedback for me? Right. And it's always very helpful, because at some point my manager did tell me something like, okay, Azim, I need you to hurry up on this thing, because we want to try and get you to hit the stretch milestones. And not asking means I wouldn't have gotten that answer. So I think just like very often the answer might be, no, great, you're doing great, you don't nothing to worry about. But on the one time that they have like constructive feedback for you and you can act on it and do something good there, they will remember this and also go in your performance review, which I think is very helpful. So yes, ask for feedback regularly.
Yep, I mean, that's also a good way to just gauge, are you doing well? Are you not doing well? Is the company or is your manager happy with what you're doing, or maybe they want you to do a little better? And that obviously does contribute down the line to you getting a return offer, right? If they weren't happy with what you did, you may not end up getting that offer, that return offer. So yeah, asking for feedback, that's another pretty good tip in my opinion. All right. What are some common mistakes that people make during interning, or maybe that you yourself made, or you saw someone else make, or have heard of these mistakes happening? So, what are some common mistakes that that you should avoid while interning, that you should be aware of, even? Anyone wants to take this? Maybe Johanna?
Okay. I guess the first one is being afraid to ask for help and for feedback as well. So asking for help can be seen as like you not being like competent, but then like you might end up not being able to resolve your issue until like maybe like week 8 of your internships, when your internship is like ending soon, and then in the end you cannot meet your goals. And actually okay, for most companies, like your managers want you to succeed in your internships also, so they do want to help you, and that's why you should actually reach out for help when you need it. And I guess relating to asking for help, some common mistakes that I previously did also is how I ask for help as well. So usually like people just ask, how do I do this? But what we can do is we can say, this is what I want to do, this is what I've done, and like this is my question. So I guess phrasing on how we can ask for help also helps, because yeah, that's one of the common mistakes that I made last time. And I guess another thing based on personal experience would be just taking the internship project as just an intern project, because maybe like as an intern, by the time you leave the company, your project is actually like not used or like deleted. But actually having a sense of ownership over your project, no matter how small it is actually like very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the asking questions thing, I feel is quite important. Sometimes you do have a question, but you're kind of afraid, like, should I ask it? Should I not ask it? Will I look like an idiot if I ask this? Be confident, ask the question, but also phrasing it correctly. You can't just say, I don't know how to do this, and then look blankly. Maybe it does not create the best impression to your manager or your coworker who you're asking the question to. So yeah, I think that's a very important thing. That's a very common mistake that people do make, just not knowing when to ask questions or not knowing how to ask the right questions. Sorry, does anyone else have anything they'd like to add on to this?
Yeah, I think like a common mistake maybe like at a broader level is that like not having like a specific goal, like specific takeaway you want from an internship. I think like when you're at work, it's very easy to just like go through the motions and just like do everything you're told, and you've end up after 12 weeks like okay, you've done an internship, but you don't really know what you got out of it. I think it's important to like set goals and like update your goals during your internship, and I think actually it's more important to like figure out what your non-goals are, because there are definitely like way more things that you would want to excel at and care about than you have time and energy for. An example of a non-goal maybe is like if you're like, let's say, a first year intern and you don't really care about getting like a full-time job offer, like a non-goal is like optimizing for like the company's metrics on how they evaluate interns, and maybe you want to maximize your learning. Maybe a non-goal is like your team works on something that you're not particularly interested in. So maybe when you're in the internship, like don't spend too much time like digging into the weeds of like the domain, but like maybe build your communication skills or your ability to like, I don't know, write good code in a team. So I think like it's important to be like intentional with what you want out of like every internship experience, and then I think that's probably helpful for when you decide on your career.
Yeah, I mean, it is quite important. Intentionality is quite an important thing, just generally in life, but even so with internships. As an intern, you want to kind of focus on what you want to do best as an intern. Kokri mentioned just writing good code, good quality code, maintainable code, scalable code. Maybe just having an ability to write really good documentation. Documentation is a rather annoying thing, but it is a big plus if you can write good documentation. Maybe something else relevant to your job. So, I mean, yeah, another common mistake is not being intentional with your actions, with your kind of your thought process even to do this. So yeah, thank you, Kokri, for bringing that up as well. Completely slipped my mind. Taking a step back from having an internship back to not having an internship, I guess. What is something slightly unconventional, so beyond doing like mock interviews and lead code and the whole grind of it all, that any of you have done that you feel um, that it helped you land an internship? Does anyone have any ideas? Anything that they've done? Maybe.
I guess like okay, I guess I'll speak a bit about this. I think like some like maybe generic unconventional advice is like, oh, emailing people directly or messaging people directly. One of the ways I got some US offers is that I would like email people who I knew are like immigrant founders, or like specifically like Singaporean immigrant founders, and like that's a way I got a bunch of internships, because presumably they have like some bias towards uh, Singaporeans. I think other than that, some like I've like included unconventional things on my resume, and like I found that like these things like have come up quite a bit in interviews. I used to like play like a video game at a decently high level, and I put my elo there. I used to like enjoy it and like have a bunch of random hobbies, and I put it on there, and like it seems like sometimes interviewers were like pretty happy to talk about that and like talk about why I cared about it, and like maybe it displayed some level of intellectual curiosity. I'm not sure, but I think like don't be afraid to, I guess like have a personality beyond like a good sweet intern candidate, like throughout the application process.
Yeah, I mean, cold emailing, as you mentioned, I think is getting like a bigger thing nowadays. A lot of people are trying it out. It basically amounts to literally sending out, could be an email, could be a bit more informal message, depending on how risky you want to take it, I guess, to say a startup founder or a hiring manager or someone like that, someone working at a company, and just asking like, hey, this is me, I'm looking for an internship, here's my past experience, giving a short rundown. There's many ways to do it, really. I'm not going to generalize that much, but yeah, it's becoming a bit more popular nowadays, so maybe that's something you want to give a try as well.
I'll also add something in terms of like preparation, because I guess they mentioned like lead code and mock interviews. I think like being a TA, and this is like a privilege that I guess like we have at NUS, and like I think other schools have similar schemes, but being like a teaching assistant for like programming courses, especially like introductory programming courses and like your data structures and algorithms courses. I think like that's an excellent way to prepare for technical interviews. Because in technical interviews you're like coding and like talking about your code, and this is like a pretty unnatural thing for like humans to do. But if you have like TA'd a programming course and had to like grade students' code and had to like explain code and step through code to your students, I think like that's an experience that like kind of mirrors a technical interview pretty closely, and I feel like that helped me a lot in my interviews.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of us are quite good at like I guess the technical side of things. Like I can ask you a question, write a code to do this, 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 and most people are able to do it. But then when it comes to explaining it in a good way, quite a few people they're able to explain it. Not saying that anyone's got bad explanations, but being like a TA, for instance, you've got to explain it really, really well so your students understand it, right? So if you have that experience, they can kind of translate that into an interview that gives you a little bit of edge, a little bit of an edge when it comes to just communicating your ideas, communicating what your code does or what your solution does or how you came about with your solution. Yeah, it can kind of give you some form of an advantage there as well. And yeah, I totally agree. Does anyone else have any unconventional things that they did? So
Yeah,
far,
this
we got
one's like slightly less unconventional, but tell me if I'm wrong. I would just say read widely, by which I mean read blog posts that software engineers have written or that maybe even VCs have written sometimes. They happen to be quite interesting. They give you a better lay of the land, because it's one thing to kind of apply to. There's like one a dynamic where like it's a very transactional situation where you're a customer and you're just applying for these internships and you're hoping to get in, but then more widely you should have a sense of what the general field is doing, what's the latest in software engineering, what are the cool companies to work for, what are the underlying dynamics behind these companies, how much is AI really being used in these companies. Those are important things to know because they will just increase your tech IQ. And yeah, I think engineers don't read much. So I'm not even saying read papers, just read blog posts that people have written. And there's many resources out there where you can see good blog posts. Yeah.
yeah, that's a very good suggestion actually. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm forgetting the name. Paul Graham is one very popular writer. I'm
Yeah,
forgetting more
exactly.
names,
I've
but
linked up an article by him as well in the chat. So yeah,
no,
you should.
that's wonderful. Sorry, I'm not looking at the chat. Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, just looking at, as you mentioned, getting a lay of the land, just reading from all these engineers, from these VCs, startup founders, whoever it is, who are in this industry, you can kind of figure out like, okay, this is where the industry is heading, and that can give you a clear idea of, okay, maybe this is what I want to do when it comes to applying for internships. So yeah, just reading in general, it also ties in with the communication, right? Because the blog post that you read will be written quite nicely. You might get some ideas on how to phrase your own thoughts and apply that to interviews as well. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of benefits that comes from reading. This is something I feel is quite useful, quite important as well. Thanks for bringing it up, Mayank. Yeah, think this is something that's going to be very useful to our audience members. Hmm. There was a question, but I think it's from the previous Q&A. Again, I apologize for that mix-up. How important, I just typed it out here, how important is having personal projects or open source? Or is there one of the two that's more important than the other? Is there a third thing that's even more important than either of the two? What are your thoughts on this?
I can kick this off. I think the main goal here is to get some engineering experience working in like building something. And the other main thing, in my opinion, is it gives you a story to tell. Right. People use personal projects and open source because it gives you a story you can talk about. Oh, I built this thing to solve this problem, and then the interviewer gets an idea of like, oh, what this person's like, what this position is like, what kind of stuff they've worked on, that kind of thing. Anything that demonstrates that is a valid answer to or a valid way to show that you've got the engineering disposition that they're looking for. And the easiest ways to do it is personal projects and open source, and that's why people talk about it, right? So I think that it's more of like whatever gives you a way to tell a good story during especially those like non-technical rounds where they talk about some challenges you face or something, or the resume deep dives where they ask like what's a interesting project you've implemented. Yeah. So it doesn't need to be a personal project or open source. It could be something else you've worked on. It could be some like consulting thing you've done, like you helped a friend build something, that kind of thing. Like maybe you grant that as personal project, whatever, but like whatever gives you stories to tell, I think is what is helpful. And do whatever you can to give yourself a couple of stories you can talk about, right? And in that way, I hope that sort of frames the importance, right? It's not in particular personal projects or open source, just do things that give you stories to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you want something that shows you have that technical expertise and knowledge in that particular area for a role that you're applying to. So, I guess speak more in concrete terms. If you're applying for a data analyst role, for instance, you might want to show that, yeah, I have worked with data before. I've worked on maybe SQL or some kind of data processing libraries or whatever it is. And personal projects, open source, as Asim said, probably the two easiest ways to do that. And so the two most talked about ways of doing that. You mentioned just anything that allows you to tell a story. Like, can you think of anything beyond these two things that can do, as you said, give you stories to talk about? Or anyone else can jump in here as well, but any more examples of things that could help?
I think a lot of my stories came from me helping someone else do something, right? It's like consulting work or whatever, right? So I wouldn't call it a personal project or open source, but on my resume, I don't list it as, oh, I was employed, right? It's just like, oh, I had this experience of helping someone build something, and then I talk about it, right? And so that's where a lot of my stories have come from, where I've talked about like, oh, build something different or had problems deploying or had like people problems or whatever, right? And then how I resolve those issues. So that's my experience in particular.
Okay. Yeah, the consulting type thing, just, yeah, helping people out on their own, whatever it is that they're doing. That can give you your own stories to talk about, because again, to help someone, you need to know what you're doing and you need to know what they're doing. Any other ideas on how to get these extra stories? I think could research play a role in this, Mac? What do you think?
Sure, but I feel like the problem with research is that the story that you put forward in a paper is often not what actually happened in your 3 months or 4 months of working on it. So like the behind the scenes of research is extremely messy, and you probably like cried at least twice. So I mean, you could perhaps fashion a story out of that, but I feel like if you have a very good research project, the by far the most interesting thing to put forward would be not how you got the result, but what the result actually is. Because that's kind of the point of doing science, right? Like, whereas I feel like, of course, you could like demonstrate that you actually did research and you like worked really hard and whatever, and you like you went through the pain. But I feel like for research stories, like it's less so.
Yeah, okay, that does make sense. I mean, research itself is a pretty intense. It could be a very long-term thing, right? Could take potentially a whole year to get some research published somewhere. So definitely unconventional, but again, I have to think about the pros and cons of everything. Technical writing is something else that I just thought about. Does anyone have any experience here with technical writing? Maybe not. I'm not sure. But yeah, technical writing just involves, one option is you kind of just write blog posts on how to do XYZ in some language. Sorry, was anyone speaking? Oh, okay, sorry. But yeah, you might Google like, how do I do this in this language? And you might come across an article on like Medium or something. That's technical writing, right? Because they know the thing, they're showing that they know the thing. So it's, as Azim mentioned, you have a story to talk about now with technical writing. But yeah, thank you, Azim and Mayank, for the answers. I mean, the most important thing is what's your story, I guess. That's the summary of this all. Kind of jumping back in, this is similar to a question that was asked before, if I can find it. Here we go. So what are some tips to maximize your internship? I think the previous question was on maximizing chances to get a return offer, but I think here this could be more on maximizing your learning opportunities, the reward that you get out of your internship, I guess. How would you go about doing that? Does anyone, maybe Johanna or Kokre?
I guess some tips. I guess one is to have a sense of ownership over your project. And I think earlier in the first section, Ben shared like a few useful tips, which is let's say dog fooding, and then think about the business impact. So by that, like you understand like the bigger picture of why you are doing your internship project. And I guess you don't just learn about like how basically learn to just do what you are tasked to do, but like you take it as like you own the project basically. Yeah, I guess that's like the first tip. The second tip is maybe not if it's possible, try not to silo yourself to like just your team or like your internship project. Talk to other teams or like talk to other members of your teams like about the product that you are working on. Yeah, I guess that builds that helps to build a bigger picture of what you are doing. Yeah.
I see, I see. I mean, yeah, you mentioned you own the project, right? I feel like that's something you can look at doing as an intern, right? When you kind of, obviously you don't own the project solely, usually, but it does give you a sense of responsibility. Like, okay, now I'm on this project. What do I do? What can I do best? And you try to learn potentially beyond the scope of your work, obviously within the limits of whatever work environment you're in. That can help you maybe learn something that you didn't expect to learn even. Um, yeah, does anyone else have any other suggestions for this?
Yeah, I think something I'll add is that like it's probably valuable to talk to people, like your managers and like other devs at the firm, not just in their capacity as like your intern manager who is here to evaluate you and give you advice about the projects, but in their capacities as like more experienced software engineers, right? So like if you have one-on-ones, it's very important, of course, to like get feedback on like your progress and like the project, but it's also like probably useful to just like talk to them as people and like ask for general advice on your career and general advice on software engineering. When I was at like Databricks, for example, I asked a lot of questions about like living in the United States, and I remember my manager even gave me like a 1 hour lecture on like how to like maximize or like minimize like the income tax you're paying if I like come back to Databricks. These are like random topics that you will learn about, and you can learn about like from experienced software engineers that aren't necessarily like things that they will tell you in their specific capacity as like your evaluator slash mentor.
Yeah, and this kind of circles back to just asking questions, right? You never know until you ask a question. Maybe they might tell you X, Y, and Z, but you ask a question, you realize there's also A, B, and C after that, if that made any sense to anyone.
If I can add on to what Corey was saying, like
Sure, go ahead.
know the people around you as people and not just like colleagues, I guess is the underlying point. And also, this is a very like growing up thing, but I realized that I got a lot of adulting advice from the people around me, who were like 2, 3 years ahead of me. And I felt that was very helpful in this whole like coming out of school or finishing school and going into the workforce kind of transition.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense to me. Sorry. Does anyone else have anything else to add on to this? Okay, all right. If not, then it's 9 o'clock. Perfect timing. Yeah, we can end it here really. So thank you all to our panelists. Thank you to Azim, Johanna, Kokri, and Mayank for coming down, taking some time off your busy days, busy weeks, and spreading your knowledge to our audience. Thank you for answering the questions. Thank you to our audience as well for staying with us so long. And yeah, you can look out for information on our Telegram channel. The links to that are here. So you got the NUS Hackers Telegram channel. There's just information regarding all our events. And the Project Intern Group, as we mentioned before, these are more internship specific questions. You can ask for people to anonymously review your resume, for example. You can just ask questions about, again, interviews, practice, anything really that you have, maybe a question that you feel wasn't fully answered here today, unfortunately, for you. You can just hop into the group, ask your question, and someone or the other will be there to answer it. And yeah, thank you all for coming and spending a night with us. We'll see you all. And well, I don't know when we'll see you all, but all the best for your summer, all the best for your internship search. And thank you once again to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.